That's why 9.5 out of 10 don't make it. They don't know what they don't know. Something comes along and eats them in the middle of the night. They never even heard that monster before to eat them.
Hi all, I'm Degan, the creator and producer of the LIBI podcast. This 100% volunteer-run show was born out of the Rainforest Alberta movement and features incredible people who are leaders, innovators, and have big ideas. What an episode today with my guest, Gabe Dunlop. Gabe has so much quality information to share, you're not going to want to miss it. Here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the LIBI podcast. Today I have an awesome guest from over in the East, Gabe Dunlop. Hey Gabe, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to chat.
Yeah. So I'd like to start off by just finding out a little bit more about you for the listeners. So could you maybe talk a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I like to joke that I'm a recovering salesman. So I was a sales executive early on in my career, and a lot of the leaders that mentored me were from the sales discipline in the media companies. And because of that, I still have a little bit of sales DNA that I carry around with me every day, but I'm trying to shake it off. So I'm recovering. I came up through the media school. So I went through college for writing, public relations, a lot of communications writing. And my first job out of school was at Toronto Hydro Corporation, which is top 10 utility in North America. And you got this kid who's gone through school for writing in with a bunch of technical leaders at one of the largest utilities. And my first job was writing briefings every morning for key stakeholders, which included the province, so the premier, the mayor's office, because the city of Toronto was a stakeholder. I think it still is a stakeholder at Toronto Hydro, and some other key execs in and around the industry. I would come in at 7 a.m. and my first task in the morning was to go through, we used to have a media clipping service before everything was automated, a media clipping service. And I would review all the media clippings, make sure nothing got missed. I would read 4 newspapers quickly, make sure no headlines were missed between the clippings and the newspapers. And then I would consolidate that into a package, including the independent market operator for electricity pricing, and into a succinct package 5 days a week that would go to those stakeholders before open of business. So that was my first job out of school.
Wow.
Then at 9 a.m., when everybody else started rolling in, my job was to work in the communications department. So corporate communications for an electrical utility. I was doing things like reporting on outages, making sure customer care was in a great place, that type of stuff. And I've had a great fortune throughout my career to be exposed to what I would call just really seasoned leaders who were very benevolent to me with their time. And I have no problem asking questions. I have no problem looking foolish. I don't mind that. That's kind of how I learn. And there was the CEO, Jim, and Jim at the time, Jim Black, he let me write some of his speeches for him. And so I was fresh out of school writing speeches for a CEO, and I had some other executives coaching me on it. Obviously, I wasn't just allowed to get what I wanted. And that sort of formed how I got my start in business. And from there, I went into media and kind of never looked back into the technical world until recently. But I ended up in television. So I worked in TV for a number of years, radio, out of home, digital, when the digital revolution was really kicking off. And through a bunch of positions, leadership, content, editorial, revenue. I've led all the departments with the exception of finance, which is probably a good thing because I don't have a background in finance, even though I really like to make money. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. So what else can I tell you?
That's great. What an interesting background, and what a great opportunity to have a young person receive that kind of mentorship and leadership throughout their career. Do you feel that leadership really helped shape who you are, or did you figure it out yourself more or less?
I did not figure it out myself. So there's a few honest to God humbling moments if I were to look back in those years, my early 20s, which I don't know how old the listeners are, but hopefully people can still relate to their early 20s, where I had 2 or 3 figures at any given time that were orbiting around my world that were showing me how it was done. So one of them was my uncle. So my uncle Malcolm, he was an executive at Rogers, which if you're a Canadian listener, you know who Rogers is. So on the media side of Rogers, He taught me a lot about how the industry worked, how the business worked, how things didn't work and why. There's a lot of regulation that drives media in Canada. It's a heavily regulated industry. Learned a lot about that. Also took me under his wing, but similarly to another mentor named Blair Peberty. So Blair Peberty, he was the senior vice president of Toronto Hydro. And long after I had left Toronto Hydro, Blair kept in close contact with me all throughout those early stages of my career. Both Blair and Malcolm took me to events, introduced me to people, exposed me to, I would say, like a section of the world that I never had exposure to previously. I grew up in a small town in Southern Ontario that's like a farm community. I could tell you how to grow and farm tomatoes, but when I was in my 20s, I couldn't tell you how to build a business. And those two really did a huge service to me, taking me through the motions of how do you meet people? How do you introduce yourself? What's persuasion look like? What does it look like to be benevolent? How do you help? How do you be useful? Things like that. So yeah, it left a large imprint on me. That's like a super huge understatement. I still keep in touch with both of them. Obviously, my uncle, there's no escaping Christmas, but he's long since retired. But I've had more than my fair share of mentors. I like to think I've been really fortunate.
That's awesome. And now you're a bit of an entrepreneur, aren't you? You have a company called UpTeaming that you are the CEO of. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I met the founder and CEO, Ben Baldwin, when it was called Founder City Project. And Ben had built this as a community for founders that had raised venture capital or were raising venture capital or were growing venture-backed companies. And those businesses grow so differently than a traditional corporation or like a classic lemonade stand kind of business or like a dry cleaning company or an auto dealer network. They're completely different. Venture-backed businesses grow at breakneck speeds. They run into walls at breakneck speeds. And because of that, the type of support they need is super specialized. And Ben was one of those founders. So he'd built a couple of companies before Founder City Project, that community. And he started getting together with some of his peers at the time, and there wasn't really a community. So he built one. He built one, and there are other call it founding members or originals, the originals in the community. They were all a part of it. They were raising venture capital early in the Canadian scene when VC was becoming a thing. It was really taking off. And they supported one another, and Ben was the orchestrator. I wasn't there, so that's how the story was relayed to me. I came in just a tad after that original, small, like we're talking fewer than 10 people. I came in after that original cohort. I don't know around what number, but I'd been looking for something that was confidential because of the business that I was in and growing at the time. We were going through a lot of change, and I was leading 3 departments. It would have been a surprise to me if you told me then, but soon to be 7. So my reports were about to double. My territories were about to double outside of Canada to include New York and the UK as well. And I was just on this sort of cusp of taking on an awful lot more. And I had opted out, if I'm being completely open. I'd opted out of the Canadian ecosystem because there weren't a lot of other companies at the scale that we were at that I could learn from. So I didn't look around and see many other leaders like me here in Canada. So I had stopped building my network in Canada, started spending time in the United States, places like New York, Venice Beach, in California, where technology and media companies were really taking off. Yeah. And I still hadn't quite found a safe space. I found lots of groups, but not lots of safe spaces. And I asked a friend of mine, a CEO friend of mine, if he had any recommendations. And he said, I think this guy named Ben Baldwin is building something just like this. And he made an introduction to Ben through another CEO that he knew. So it was a secondhand intro. I got an introduction to Ben. I was then I stayed a customer. I came out to one session. I stayed a customer for 2 years. And it was all because I wanted somewhere to open up on my toughest problems where I wasn't afraid people were going to judge me or orchestrate an agenda against me, or there would be some sort of motive that was counterproductive to me. It was confidential, which meant the world. Second, it was curated, meaning the people who were there had all come in through someone that knew someone. So it was grown through word of mouth and that organic, people use the word organic today differently, but that organic growth or that human to human contact made such a difference in the types of individuals that came in, very thoughtful, high caliber, really committed. They paid attention to the rules keenly, and it was facilitated. So for context, the business that I was, so at that business, I was the vice president, and then I was the chief marketing officer. and we were growing at 10,000% year over year. So it was
Wow.
really, really fast. When you're growing that big, when you're chasing 100 million and valuations are going bananas, I kind of wanted to be with, I completely wanted to be with other people who understood how time poor I was. I was fully prepared to come down and invest an hour to 3 hours if it meant that I would be further ahead departing that room than when I arrived. I found that with the way Ben ran the room. And to make a long story longer, I said to Ben, would you be open to me sharing some ideas for the business? And we developed a friendship at that point because I had lots of feedback for Ben, and the rest is kind of history. I went over to Ben's house. We talked a number of times about the way this business could grow. He'd had some really unique experience that was, for context, I don't think a lot of people quite understand how special the knowledge is that Ben has, and he'll never be the guy out there promoting himself, but there are like less than 20 high caliber peer-to-peer communities in the world. And for venture-backed companies, and when I say venture-backed companies, think of companies like Meta, or back in the day was Facebook, Twitter, Amazon. These are the original venture-backed companies. So when they grow, they really take off. Can you name a single community that is bespoke or built just for the needs of those CEOs and founders? No. A lot of them are attached to accelerators, and some wonderful places like Y Combinator or Andreessen Horowitz A16Z, their speedrun community is pretty great, but not much else. PO is phenomenal, but it sits at a cross-section of not technology companies. Everybody except for technology companies is really at home in YPO. And then the other nuance that is specialized to what Ben had zeroed in on is that founders need different matches throughout the lifetime of their company, because the people that you need to learn from at the beginning is very different than the midpoint of the company, very different than like the sustainability period or the exit period or the transaction period. And through those stages, you've got to have enough of an ecosystem or enough of a population that you can find the matches you need to get ahead with your business. And anyways, the whole thing came together for me. Ben and I figured out some different plans to grow the thing, and we've been having fun ever since. So 5 years into this journey with Ben, UpTeaming predates me. So it's an 8.5-year-old business. But that's the long story of it.
Wow. It's a really interesting pathway. What you provide. Ben sounds like an amazing person, and it's really serendipitous that you were able to meet him and connect that way. That's really cool. And you're absolutely right. I don't know of any organizations that provide that level of growth and value to that scaling venture capital funding partners and stuff like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, you could think for a second. So I can riff on that point if you think do you think it'd be interesting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if you think of the business ecosystem of venture-backed companies, so just think of the geography for a second, because it's an interesting way to look at it and the constraints that appear. If you look at a comparable, so like the NHL is the highest order of professional that you get in the craft of hockey. So if you're a hockey player, you want to end up on an NHL team or a women's professional team. In that instance, you've got an amazing scouting and farming system, right? It's a development system where people trade up the tiers as they show more promise and skill, and they're recognized for their value, and they continue to graduate all the way up to the highest level of pro. In the founder ecosystem, supports that are available don't work that way. So they max out locally. There's a lot of local accelerators, or even if they're not local, if they call themselves an international accelerator, meaning they take people from all over the place, but then they hive them off into their own geography, like San Francisco or New York City. Those places are operating with a constraint. You're only ever going to be able to play against the best player in your hometown if that's where you go all the time. So if you go to the local rink, you're only going to play against the strongest player from the local rink. Similarly, in Founderland, there's a lot of local support, but then once you start breaking out of the majority and your company starts hitting its stride, you find product market fit, you're going to market, you need to add talent, you need to add customers, you need to add capital. Local usually doesn't have all the answers that you need. So there's a lot of folks out there building who are questioning, from what I hear. It's not me. I'm not questioning whether I live here or not. I'm staying put in Canada. But there's a lot of folks questioning, do we build from here? Do we not build from here? My observation is you don't have to move in order to cash in on all those things or harvest all those things that I just mentioned. There's great talent, there's great people, there's great capital everywhere. You no longer have to be where those things are for it to work. But you have to find doors. So the trick right now is not relocation. Relocation is like if you physically relocate yourself, because I have friends who are doing this right now, it's like a shortcut. It's a sure shot. If you physically relocate your company right now to the Valley, you are guaranteed proximate access to talent, capital, and people that are like-minded like you. But once you get there, you still have to find doors because they're not just going to present themselves. Similarly, if you stay in, I think you're in Calgary. If you stay in Calgary, if you stay in Toronto, if you stay in Halifax, doesn't really matter. You still have to find the doors. The doors are the doors. So how do you go about finding doors? They're kind of hidden from sight. So you either have to ask for help and someone has to lend you a hand, or someone has to take you under their wing and say, I'm going to help you proactively. What happened to me early in my career? So it begs the question when Canada's sort of looking and builders in Canada are looking at how do I get ahead? I think the question is not move, remote or hybrid or all those silly questions. It's just how do I find access?
Right.
And there's an awful lot of talk in this country about events and gatherings and coalitions and organizing teams and things like that. Not a ton of talk about access and really getting excellent at DJing access. That's something that would be meaningful for, if you were in one of our sessions and you met a CEO or a founder who was out for the first time or a head of engineering, and you asked them when they came into the session how they felt, and when they departed the session how they felt, they would tell you, I came in muddy, I departed clear-minded, and I kind of knew what to do next. I have clarity on my next step. That's only because of the people they were with. It has very little to do with me. I'm not sitting at a table, it's other people. So what did we provide? Well, we provided access. Similarly, though, when you're walking around the community and you talk to somebody and they say, I just raised a big check size, I raised a big round, seed capital, Series A, whatever, or I won a huge account. The difference maker is access on all of those situations. And the shorter the access we can provide between wherever that builder is and wherever they need to get to, that usually equals time. And that's time to benefit on economic gains. So the question that I don't think we've fully wrapped our heads around it, so it's not a criticism, it's just my observation is I don't hear a lot, or in my opinion, enough conversations around the word access right now in this country when it's the single fastest advantage to all of us getting ahead. I mean, you have one Shopify that grows, and I know it's an easy one to reference because they've exploded and done so super well, but there are many others coming up like Cohere, other companies like PureFacts Financial or VeriFast. These are ultra fast moving companies and growing really rapidly. How do we continue to provide all of them with access to what they need? People, resources, customers, things like that.
So is your organization then able to open those doors across North America or across, including UK and stuff? Are you able to bring all those people together somehow?
Yeah, I picture that scene in when Chevy Chase is up on the roof in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and the lights won't come on. And he's just so frustrated. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
He covers the house in lights and then he flips the switch and they don't go on and he can't figure out what's going on. That switch, the switch itself is where we concentrate. You flip on that switch and you're connected to all these other lights across the world. And then the whole house is lit up. All the lights want to be connected. They definitely do. You can ask them. We have tons of testimonials on this. This is why we get out of bed and do the work that we do. Absolutely. But it's still not happening organically, and an interesting opportunity between the G7 nations to coordinate or cooperate on this. But we have a particularly easy time finding like-minded collaborators because everyone agrees that like tacit knowledge transfer is part of the problem with building companies. That's why 9.5 out of 10 don't make it. They don't know what they don't know. So something comes along and eats them in the middle of the night that they never even heard that monster before it eat them.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. We're building a program in the UK, or we're doing work in New Zealand right now, Canada, the United States. The same impediment exists there that exists here, that exists everywhere, which is you're geographically constrained frequently where you're based. But it's the same constraint no matter where you live. So access is the same problem that everyone's facing. So yes, it's a big motive for the work that we do.
It's so fascinating that you say that, especially in this modern day, because of what happened in 2019, 2021, we're all so connected via the computer network and video conferencing and all that stuff. And there's a lot of companies that work remotely around the world and that kind of thing. And yet we still have trouble getting connected, which is really interesting. And it's really cool that your organization provides that value to people, because I know for myself as an entrepreneur, you don't know what you don't know. And when I started my first company, I felt like I was on my own and I had to figure it all out on my own. And I made a whole pile of mistakes. And then later on, I got connected to some of the local communities here, and you start to run into people that actually have been there before, been there and done that. And that value in just in the small business is huge. So I can imagine now things are going crazy and all these people are signing up for your platform or whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And being able to have access to those people who have been there and done that, and they can say, okay, hold on, don't do that, do this, and make sure you take care of this. And you need to hire a good blah, blah, blah. That's golden value that could save someone tons and tons of money, potentially even their company, if it's done right. And I imagine you said you had a bunch of testimonials. I imagine you have a whole bunch of success stories as well from these get-togethers and connections.
Yeah, we've had some interesting cases where companies have actually been founded by people that meet in some of our forums. So two people will come from different businesses they were running and building, and then all of a sudden they really strike up a conversation. They develop deep trust with one another very quickly because the way we run things. And then before you know it, someone said, hey, we started this business together and now we've scaled up. So a real example, and they would talk to you about this, are the co-founders of Hyper. So that they recently exited to Motorola, but they met through an UpTeaming forum, actually.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. That sort of tells you what value you're adding. Definitely. Yeah. Now, you've spoken a couple of times about technology related. So is a lot of your focus around technology, or is that just a happenstance?
In what sense? Can you ask the question in a different way?
Yeah. Is the bulk of your focus on technology and innovation related type businesses, or is it pretty much what an agriculture business or a fintech business or stuff like that? Are they all in there mixed together?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll answer it in two parts. The core DNA of UpTeaming is the DNA that every company wants, which is speed without wreckage. Mm-hmm. That's like the core DNA. We were built for startups and venture-backed startups, which are the fastest growing companies on the frontier of innovation. So that's who everything that we built was built for. So when you look at our check-in forms, our agendas, the way that we run a session, even the way that Zoom starts and stops, our checkouts, the way that we ask for feedback on what we do, it's built for the most impatient, time-starved customer on earth. Their founders are savage with their time because they have to survive, and time is a finite resource. That DNA is sought after by CEOs of Fortune 50, Fortune 100, and Fortune 500 companies too, because what CEO doesn't want their leaders to go faster? I don't know a single one, especially right now with AI, with what's happening. Being nimble, adaptive, moving relatively quickly is something that's being rewarded. You hear the shift. There's been a shift in business language, and I don't know if you've noticed it in your interviews, like on the show here, Al, but when people used to describe success in a business, just friends talking, they would say, I built an initiative, or I just wrapped up a program, or we've secured funding. They would speak in, we just won a big account. That would be the milestone that they're visualizing for you when they're talking. And now people, the most common thing that I hear, and I know I'm in a bit of a bubble, but the most common thing that I hear is, I built an app over the weekend, or I just shipped this feature and it used to take me a year to build this thing. And now I did it with AI and blah, blah, blah. Even if AI is not entering the conversation as the reason why, the thing that people are most interested in right now in business is speed. Mm-hmm. How do we go faster, achieve more, outpace our competitor, stay ahead of our competitor, learn that thing, try it, break it, move on faster? That's the language that business speaks right now. And that's the core of what we do. Right. So you can see why we've worked with companies as large as Walmart, where their leaders are coming in to get some of that DNA. They want to be with builders on the frontier that are building, buying, breaking things so that they can learn from them and take that experience and those playbooks back into the mothership at corporate HQ and apply them into their time, into their workflow to save time in their lives.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting that a big monster like that, like Walmart, would be focused on that. That really says a lot about who they are, not wanting to fall behind and rest on the laurels and stuff and all that kind of stuff. But that's
one of the most innovative companies on the planet right now. Like, and they're making it not a secret that they're competing head to head with Amazon, and they intend not to compete. They intend to dominate.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
There are others just like that, but it doesn't really matter what category you're in right now. If you're a business leader, the language that you need to learn how to speak, in my estimation, is speed. Especially if you're in a publicly traded company, or where you have shareholder accountability, or you have investors or a board, people that are holding you to account. You need to be able to speak to speed. Most of the questions that you will be fielding are speed related. So if you don't do something, if you haven't done something that someone expected you to do on your board, that question will be about, why are we taking so long? Speed. If we did something and somebody else, a competitor, did something similar to us, why didn't we do it first? When will we know if it's ready? When will we know if it's right? How can we scale it? All those kinds of questions. We used to have roadmaps you came from the tech builder side, so you know what a roadmap looks like. It's, sure, we're going to do this over the span of a year. It's contributing to these strategic priorities. The world's not talking that way right now as much.
No. And even my field, which is software development, has changed so drastically. And you still see these companies that want to have these drawn out roadmaps and a waterfall Gantt chart of how everything's going to work out. And it's like, what? I would have finished that already by the time you put the chart together. It's just crazy.
It's
and
so true.
I think that people aren't grasping that, especially the more business type, non-tech people. They don't realize how things have changed, and they're up for a big learn. And that's interesting. So speed aside, as you've made that crystal clear that everything's focused on speed, what are like a couple of things that you see very common as problems that people run into as they're trying to scale their businesses really quickly? Is there anything that stands out as like just super common that people don't really know, but then it's always the same thing? Is there anything like that, or is it pretty wildly different?
Everyone uses their own words to describe their challenges individually. So when someone's coming to a forum with us, a CEO or founder or head of engineering, they've got a challenge in hand that they would describe in their own words. Some of them are posted on our site, so you can go and see them in the challenge gallery. But a boil down, so if you're like, hey, Gabe, what's the boil down on that? A ton of challenges are related to trust building, trust upholding, and trust strengthening. So imagine, you're trying to raise capital. Well, what causes people to say yes? The person who's hearing your narrative has developed some level of conviction in what you're saying to be true. And they believe you, and there's something there where they ascribe trust to you enough to write a check and pass it across the table. So that's trust building. Keeping the trust is, you picture you have a board, and the board is, you feel like they've got it in for you. And you're like, I can't seem to get it right. They're always second guessing me. They really have it out for me. And I can tell by the way they're behaving. That's upholding the trust. There's something rickety in the relationship, probably, is my guess from just hearing people talk about this a bajillion times. There's usually something causing them to trip across a wire that's causing the trust question mark to go up. And then growing trust. It's like it's a real challenge for everyone, but a lot of people struggle to build trust, or grow trust when times are harder. So imagine I find myself in a situation, I could probably give you a specific example where, something negative has happened and it has to be handled. I'm trying to think of a specific example I can give you. Something negative has happened and has to be handled. And through that negative experience, the best outcome is growing trust, not status quo, but growing trust. How do you do those kinds of things? Because if you're in a fast growing business, you will get lots, I don't want to say wrong, but you'll make lots of mistakes And in those moments, how do you grow trust? Because trust is like the number one currency of business. If something breaks or something goes haywire, how do you communicate that internally to stakeholder number one, which is your people and your investors, and then your partners in the business and things like that? How do you grow trust in those moments? A lot of leaders want to talk about those things because there's not really a playbook on these situations. Like the amount of crises that a founder puts out are like 150 times a year, bi-weekly for some of these companies, versus the average CEO who really has tough times a couple of times, maybe once a year. So a lot of folks want to get good at the trust stuff. That's a big one. Go to market is a real challenge. So lots and lots of questions around go to market, the ability to really scale sales. So do big revenue numbers relatively quickly, because after you raise a Series A, the investors expect you to be cashing in. They want you to harvest. That's the common thing, at least I would say, if I'm generalizing. So go to market's a big one. Creating systems for people, systems and governance. Those are challenging for just about everyone who's never done it before. A lot of founders have not created people systems. They are learning on the fly. So they're developing that playbook as they go. To go from a 2-person company to 25 is a huge bridge to cross. And then 25 to 40 is a big one, 40 to 80, 80 to 120. And those people systems don't build themselves. So a lot of questions around that. And then Ben and I have a joke. It's an inside joke, but we share it with our customers. So I think it's okay to say here where we joke at a certain scale, every problem is a people problem. Everything comes from people.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's cool. What an interesting perspective. One thing I want to ask you before we start wrapping up here is, because your organization it sounds to me to be fairly global, or at least larger than North America. If someone's listening to this episode and they're like, oh my God, I need Gabe's help, is that totally cool? Are you welcome? Just reach out, or are you very focused on a specific area or a specific type of business, or is there something? Do you have like a restriction in place, or are you? Yeah, let's talk.
There's two things. So most of our business comes from referrals. So I would say to anyone listening, if whom I've been describing sounds like somebody, a founder who is suffering through these things, they could use some backup or support to stop wasting time, tap into others' experiences, then refer them, send them to UpTeaming. We'll take fantastic care of them. That's for sure. The second group, which is a little bit more direct, are engineering leaders or technical leaders. There's just an unbelievable amount of new pressure that's falling on heads of engineering that's never been there before. Engineering used to be a distant cousin of the IT department, right? That's your origin story. You know that department. They didn't have the spotlight or the pressure or the expectations riding on them that they do today. Engineering leaders today are the king makers and queen makers of a lot of companies. If a CEO wants to get anything done, if you want to ship that new AI feature, if you want to test out that new database, if you want to implement something for sales that's got multi-agent orchestration, you have to go through engineering if you're the CEO. And if you're the head of engineering, you now have to be able to communicate inwardly to the company and do it smoothly and accountably so that you come across building confidence, building trust in a way that is, I would say, a new set of expectations that have only really grown over the last 1 to 1.5 years. So the engineering leaders that are out there building, taking on the frontiers of AI, whether you're in a bank, at an airline, an automotive technology company, or you're in a venture-backed company as a head of engineering, those groups are the next focus that we're working on right now. And they're growing a lot at UpTeaming, and those people can just reach out directly. We've got a pile of peer leader labs where people can come check out what we do, get some training, get a bit of a first taste of what it feels like to be in a peer group, decide, is this where I want to invest my time and money? And then ongoing, those groups they're consistent, perpetual. So if you decide this is the place for you, you're an engineering leader that wants to be around other high-performing, fast-growing engineering leaders, this is the place for you. I will tell you, there's not a lot of places for engineering leaders to go. There's not
I believe that
amount of support out there. You and I were chatting about this a week ago. It's like not many L&D programs or communities for that matter that have sprung up independently of L&D programs have been built for engineering leaders, right?
Yeah.
You've got CIO magazine. How's that help me? Not right now.
So true. It's absolutely brilliant that you have this company and that you're helping so many people. I think it sounds brilliant, and I'm really looking forward to staying in touch with you and learning more about your organization and the kind of things that you work on day to day. Thank you very much for your time today, Gabe. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Thanks, Al.
All right. Cheers. Everybody else, tune in and join the podcast at libby.ca and check out some of our past episodes over the last 7 years. And we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Why not become a podcast host yourself? LIBI is a community podcast, and we would love to have your voice as a host or a guest. Check out libi.ca for more information, show notes, and links to listen to every single episode we've done over the past 7 years.
This episode is brought to you by New Idea Machine. We develop custom apps, automations, and integrations for entrepreneurs and established business owners. Visit newideamachine.com for more info.
Music for the show was created by Tony Degan.